Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of a new video series that I've decided to do, which is going to be called Property Basics in Singapore, or Singapore Property Basics. And the reason why I decided to do this video is because I realized that Singapore property laws are kind of complicated, right? Even compared to other countries. And there are lots of stuff that people out there who are not industry, they want to find out. It could be a simple question, but it's quite difficult to get the answer sometimes, or the answers look complicated. So they want to ask an agent. They could be embarrassed to ask an agent, or they feel it's not necessary to ask an agent. So I try to do these videos as a form of education series, free to the public, so that you can hopefully get some questions answered to you uh, before you engage an agent. Yeah, so in today's first episode, we're going to talk about should you buy a BTO, a HDB resale, or an executive condominium? This is a typical question that most people have when they want to get started on the property ladder in Singapore. Which should they buy first, and what are the considerations, the pros and cons of each? Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is the BTO. So BTO is short for build to order flats, and you may have heard this term quite a fair bit in Singapore. BTO, BTO. Shall we go for BTO? So BTO refers to the process where you buy a new launch HDB flat from the government through HDB. So HDB is a Singapore government agency. So HDB sells these flats through BTO launches. Typically, there are about 4 BTO launches a year. The most recent one was in February. I think the normal ones are February, May, August, and November. I think these are typical times in the year that they do BTO launches. So you go to HDB website, you apply for BTO through the HDB website, right? So a BTO is a new launch HDB, as in it hasn't been built yet. It's just a plan. All you get is some brochures and a model, right? And you're buying off the brochure and the model. Okay, there's no real property to see. Okay, but the biggest advantage of buying a BTO is the price. Effectively, BTOs are the cheapest form of HDB, or not HDB, residential housing in Singapore, right? Any form of residential housing in Singapore, BTOs are the cheapest because you're buying subsidized price from the government at the launch. Okay, so we're saying about $100 over $1,000 Sing, right? For a studio or 2-room flat. A 3-room flat could be 200,000, 300,000 Sing. A 4-room flat could be 400,000 Sing. So they are cheap, right? And if you are someone with a budget constraint, BTOs are the place to go. The second benefit of buying a BTO, of course, is the design. Right, nowadays, some people have the perception that, oh, I'm buying a flat, it's old flat, the long corridors and not nice. The 50s, 60s design is a very old, not nice house, right? But BTOs typically designed by the HDB today are pretty nice, right? Some of them are pretty close to condo designs, although you don't enjoy condo facilities. But a lot of BTO layout plans are pretty spacious and large. You get a lot of space for what you pay for. And I think there's nothing bad about buying a BTO today. And like I said, you'll be very surprised at how nice some of these BTOs are. And especially if you take a look at Punggol, which is the latest example of what a latest designs of HDB today, I think they're pretty decent if you go and see flats in Punggol today, right? The third benefit of buying a HDB, of course, is you can use CPF and HDB grants, right? So if you have someone from a lower income situation, right, you don't have a high income, or you and your spouses have a high income, right, or you have from a disadvantaged situation, you can apply for HDB and housing grants that will effectively reduce the price further. And we say the grants, how much are they? They're not small, yeah. They are 10, 20,000, 30,000 and more, right? The grants. So you can effectively bring down the BTO price a lot. When I say a lot, really a lot, I mean it's a big chunk that can go down through HDB grants. So effectively, Singapore government is very good in this, right, to help people of all stratas in society to have their own roof over their head in Singapore, which I think is great. And I think one of the big advantages most Singaporeans should take advantage of. Another way that BTOs are priced is typically from the location, right? So if you're buying a BTO in a mature location, for example, Queenstown, Ang Mo Kio, Bedok, right, the prime places in Singapore, these BTOs tend to be more expensive versus you buy a BTO in a non-mature location. So what is non-mature? Non-mature typically is further off from Singapore CBD. So we are referring to places like maybe Punggol, although Punggol is not that ulu anymore. Okay, Tengah, right, the new township of Tengah, Woodlands, Yishun, Bukit Batok, UT, these kind of places, right? Typically, these BTOs there will be cheaper. So the government is trying to say you have to choose that. If you want to buy a mature location, you have to pay a higher price. If you want to buy a non-mature location, you can get a much cheaper price. So what are the cons or the negatives of buying a BTO? First of all, because these are new launches, effectively you have to wait out the construction period. right? And construction period is anywhere from 3 to 5 years, although the Singapore government is going to try to bring this down to 3 years. I think in many cases we have experienced is anywhere from 3 to 5 years, even longer, especially during problem. Number two is that you are subject to HDB buying regulations. So because HDB is public housing, BTOs are also public housing, so they are regulated, right? More regulated than private condos. So when you say more regulated, the most typical example is how to buy it. So when you buy a HDB in Singapore, BTO or not, the typical requirement is to form a family nucleus. So in the most common scenario, this is a husband and wife, or at very minimum fiance, fiancée, right? If you are single, you have to be above 35 and typically have to buy with a parent or sibling, right? So these are all the considerations when it comes to buy a BTO. You cannot simply buy just for the sake of or you just want to buy just like that, right? There are some requirements that the HDB require you. We will not go into too detail here today, right? And one of the bigger HDB requirements as well is the MOP. Now, what is the MOP? The MOP is the minimum occupation period. You may hear this term a lot as well when people talk about real estate. So MOP is the 5-year MOP, right? In Singapore, MOP is 5 years. Is the period you need to stay in that flat after you get your keys. So as I said earlier, a construction period could be 3 to 5 years. After you get your keys, you have to stay in this flat for 5 years to fulfill this 5-year MOP. You cannot rent out the flat. You cannot say you want to give to other people to stay. You have to stay in this flat for 5 years, right? That minimum occupation period. So all in all, from the construction period 3 to 5 years to the MOP 5 years. So from the day you sign buying this BTO, right, to the day that you can finally sell or rent out this BTO, it could be 8 years, 10 years, or even longer, right? And for some people say, wow, that's very long, like Ryan. So in a sense, yeah, it's a long time. But also, if you think about it, most people who buy their BTOs are the family nucleus, so husband and wife. So that period where you stay in that property 8 to 10 years, you could be bought in the BTO when you were in your 20s, right? And by the time you have the ability to sell your BTO, right, you'll be in your 30s to 40s. And that's typically the time when your BTO would have appreciated in price. And typically in Singapore, a lot of BTOs appreciate in price. I think you have heard about this situation because BTOs are sold at subsidized price. And by the time you fulfill MOP, it's 8 to 10 years. And in 8 to 10 years, lots of real estate tend to appreciate in value. And so when you sell your BTO, you will make a profit. So in that sense, it's not that long either. It's a reasonable time frame, but it is what it is. That's the way BTO work. That's the way MOP works, right? So you have to wait out 5 years after you get the keys to the property, and you need to live there. You cannot rent out or do other stuff with the property. You need to stay in the BTO, like it or not. And finally, in a negative about BTOs that is often not mentioned is the demand, the requirement to ballot, right? So popular BTOs, for example, if you say Queenstown 4-room flat, right, they may be very popular. Lots of people want to buy this, but they could only be available maybe 200 units. But 1,000 people or 1,000 couples are trying to buy the 200 units of Queenstown 4-room BTO flats. So because there's 1,000 people applying, there's only 200 flats available, so your chance is 1 out of 5. You have a ballot process. The government will randomly draw who are the 5 people, out of the 5 people, who's the lucky one that gets the ballot, right? So in many situations, we see that popular flats, right, tend to be very oversubscribed. And then you have flats which are less in demand, right? They are undersubscribed. So the problem is that if you are too picky, right? If you have very specific requirement, Ryan, I only want to buy mature area 4-room flat, right? And you die must buy this place, right? And then you may find that demand is always very strong and you keep balloting and you don't get it and you get frustrated, right? So some people are lucky, they get the ballot early. Some people are unlucky, they may ballot many times for units that they want and they don't get it, right? So that is a typical problem that you face with BTOs as well, especially if you're picky or selective with the choice of unit that you want. Okay, so let's move on to HDB resale. Now, as per the term implies, resale refers to buying an HDB flat from the secondary market. It means you are buying from someone who already owns this HDB. You are not buying from the HDB government itself. You are buying from another owner who has an existing HDB. So they're selling to you like a resale transaction, second-hand transaction. Okay, so the benefit of buying a resale HDB is that you can immediately see what the unit is, right, compared to a BTO. Like BTO, you're buying off plan, off brochure, off a model, right? There may be a lot of factors that you cannot tell when you're buying a BTO, right? So for example, right, neighbors. When you buy a resale flat, you can see, oh, who are the neighbors? Are there neighbors that you like or you don't like, right? Could you have potential problem with neighbors? You could, for example, when you buy resale, you can tell how about the wind, right? Is there good air, fresh air? These are kind of things that you can tell when you buy a resale flat. You can get condition. When you buy a resale flat, you could potentially buy a resale flat that is in poor condition. That means the current owners didn't take care of it well. There could be a lot of repairs to be made. Or you could buy a resale flat that could already be nicely renovated with a lot of stuff done up, right? So those are the options and choices you get when you buy a HDB resale. You can actually see what you are buying, right? And I think that's a very big factor for a lot of people when you're trying to buy a house, right? So that's the biggest pro if you ask me of buying a resale unit. The second pro, of course, of buying a resale unit is the shorter amount of time it takes to get the keys, right? Now, when you buy a BTO, you have to wait 3-5 years, right? Time is measured in years, right? But if you buy a resale flat, the time is measured in months, okay? So you could get a resale flat in your hands after you buy it as short as 2 to 3 months, right? If there's extension by the seller, maybe 5 months, right, to 6 months. But basically you measure in months, right? You have a much shorter period to getting the keys compared to a BTO. Okay, you don't have to wait so long. So like if you have like you want to start a family soon, you want to start to have kids, planning for this kind of stuff, you don't want to wait 3 to 5 years, right, for construction period, then resale flat is for you because like I said, you can see the actual property, you like it, your wife like it, your husband like it, right? And you know that you can get the keys in this fixed time frame of 2-3 months or 5 months, depending on the flat situation when you buy. So that is a very, very big plus point for people who cannot wait years to get the keys of their unit. Okay, so what are the negatives of buying a HDB resale? I think number one, you can consider its pricing. Okay, you're of course paying a slightly higher price than a BTO, right? How much higher again depends on the market because this you are buying from another owner. There's negotiation involved, right? And there may be scarcity of the units, right? You may not have a lot of choices for you to buy depending on the market situation. If the market is hot, there may not be a lot of choices to buy from. If the market is bad, of course you may have more choices, right? And that may affect the negotiation on the price that you want to buy. Number two, of course, that when you buy a HDB resale, the lease would have run a bit. You're not getting a fresh 99-year lease HDB. You'll probably buy a HDB that's probably just over 90 years or maybe under 90 years old, right? So your lease will not be fresh. But I think in many cases, many people don't really care if you're buying to stay because 90 years is still pretty long. HDB lease will very most likely outlive you rather than you outlive the HDB, right? And of course, other pros and cons of buying a HDB resale is that yes, you can still use CPF and HDB grants when buying a HDB resale. There are fewer grants available when you buy a resale, but there are still grants there. And the other main negative, of course, is that you are still subject to HDB buying regulations. So you still have to form a family nucleus, husband and wife, typically, or single over 35. These are the most common ones. And you still have to subject to the 5-year MOP, just like a BTO earlier, because HDB, whether BTO or resale, are always subject to HDB regulation. So the third and final option we're going to cover in this video today is the executive condominium, or what we fondly call the EC. Now, an EC, right, from the outside, as per the name implies, it's just like a condo, right? It's built by private developers. It's not built by HDB. Yeah? So the land is sold to private developer and private developer build it. So just like, and it's designed just like any other condo. It comes with facilities. There'll be a gated garden area, swimming pool, gym, right? Fancy designs, right? Layout plans just like condos. So in that sense, from a technical perspective, an EC and the condominium is the same, right? They are built like a condo. The only difference where EC differs is that when you buy an EC at the launch, right? Because you're buying from a developer at the new launch, an EC is subject to the same HDB requirements to buy, like a HDB. So when you buy, you need to form a family nucleus, typically husband and wife, right? And there's an income cap as well, which is not more than $16,000 household income per month, right? So all these come into play when you buy an EC. The biggest pro of buying an EC is that an EC sort of converts from a HDB to a condo in 5 to 10 years time. So how does that work? So when you get your keys, you have to fulfill an MOP, just like a HDB, right? So when you get your EC keys, wow, you have a brand new condo, looks like a condo, feels like a condo, right? Outside people will see it's a condo, right? But this EC is subject to 5-year MOP, just like HDB. Right. But after you clear this 5-year MOP, this EC can now then be sold or rented to Singaporean citizens or Singapore PR. Okay, so it's partially converting. And if you wait another 5 years, so total 10 years, right? This EC can also be sold to foreigners. So in essence, your EC fully convert from HDB to a full private condominium in 10 years time. So that is the biggest benefit of an EC, right? You buy HDB rules, but after 10 years, it becomes a full private condo. You can sell to a foreigner even, but I mean, you don't have to wait until 10 years. You can wait until 5 years, right? In the 5 year, you can sell to citizens and PR already. So this is the biggest defining factor of what an EC is. Add on to that, right? When the government sell the land to the developer to build an EC, this EC land is typically sold at a cheaper subsidized price. So it's like what our previous housing minister used to say, buying an EC is like buying a Lexus at the price of a Toyota Corolla, right? You're buying a Lexus at Toyota prices, right? You get a superior premium product at a subsidized price. So because the developer buy the land cheaper, they can then sell the EC to you cheaper. And because you bought the EC, right, after 5 to 10 years, your EC become a full condo. You enjoy the pricing jump, right? You are treated like a full condo after 5 to 10 years. So that is where you enjoy the price appreciation. And I think if you look in the history of ECs in Singapore, I think practically all ECs have made money in Singapore, right? It's like an almost guaranteed, almost guaranteed kind of price appreciation because of the conversion factor, right? Where 5 to 10 years later, your EC turns into a full private condo. So why would you consider an EC? You will consider an EC when your income range is not too low, right? You're hovering in the range of just under $16,000 household income. You want to buy a private condo, but you're too worried that private condo could be too much of a stretch, right? So what you do is you buy an EC instead, because an EC is sort of like a sandwich design hybrid property that will convert from HDB to condo, right? So lots of people who are in this category, right, they will go for EC instead. And in fact, I would say I would definitely recommend to go for EC instead of condo if that option exists for a couple in this range. Okay, so let's summarize the 3 categories of property that we discussed today. So number 1 is BTO, build to order. Why would you buy BTO? Because it's the cheapest price available, right? You are okay to wait the 3 to 5 year construction period, right? You may have to choose between mature and non-mature location, right? But that doesn't matter, right? And you can form the family nucleus as a HDB requirement to buy, right? Not typically husband and wife, could be single over 35. And you're okay that after you get keys, you have to stay in this property for a minimum 5 years to fulfill the 5 year MOP period before you can sell or rent it out. Why would you consider HDB resale? You cannot wait 3 to 5 years construction period. You want a house that you can move in a matter of months, right? You want to see the property. How does it look like before you buy, right? So then you will buy a HDB resale, right? Although you buy HDB resale, same thing, you are subject to HDB buying requirements. You have to fulfill a 5 year MOP as well. And third, why would you consider an executive condominium EC? It's because you have an income maybe just under the $16,000 household income range, right? You're thinking to buy a condo, but you're worried that a condo could stretch you too much, right? And you buy an EC because it's better value. You do get a condo-like property for the subsidized price of an EC. Then you will consider buying an EC instead, because anyhow, the EC will convert into a full private condo in 5 to 10 years time after you get your keys. So I hope today's video covers the basics for you. I cover these 3 categories: BTO, HDB resale, and EC, because these are the most common types for the majority of the Singapore population when they want to start buying their first property. And I hope this gives you some insight about which type of property you need to buy. Everyone has a different scenario. So I hope you liked today's sharing, and I will appreciate if you enjoy our content to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, right? And please share this with your friends. In the video description, there is also links to my TikTok channel, our email mailing list, our Facebook groups, and different ways you can get content from myself and my team, right, about how we navigate the Singapore property markets. We also talk about Malaysia as well. And thank you very much.